Why is white karma code actually much better than we thought? And yeah, maybe this also has something to do with our predictions for the next few minutes regarding code that's been missing for a long time. In other words, an analysis of white karma and code that's been missing ever since Jura severed his arm. I think it's all interconnected. Yeah, I'm sure you know what I mean. First and foremost, to kick things off, we'll start with a brief recap of our predictions or analyses, which I'm sure are numerous and certainly not the first time we've predicted Code's reappearance. Specifically starting from chapter 15, where Code met a tragic end after his hiding place behind the black cube was exposed by Ryu and he ended up with a severed arm. He's been completely gone for over a year, at least until chapter 32. And as we know from chapter 15, which was released on October 20th, 2024, until perhaps April 20th next year, Code won't really reveal his whereabouts or even his next plan. Because looking at the latest chapter, especially the prediction that has so far been the hope that Mamushi will lose, and that will also be the turning point where Code appears to take his Togodama, it seems we can't really underestimate Mamushi, right? And it is precisely at this point that we enter the most interesting part. Because if Mamushi cannot be underestimated, then automatically all predictions regarding Code's appearance must also be pushed back a bit, because once again, given the current situation where we certainly can't just dismiss Mamushi, I think it's pretty hard to be optimistic that Code will return or appear in the midst of that invasion. And that means, what if we reevaluate things from a different perspective? So it's no longer a matter of when he appears, but under what conditions he will return. Because honestly, behind all the predictions or analyses about Mamushi and Code, we've been too focused on one thing, namely loss. Losing an arm, losing a position, or even perhaps losing relevance within the story. Yeah, that's the reality, but we've forgotten one important thing. And maybe you haven't forgotten that Code isn't an ordinary character. He's the only user of white karma who failed to become a vessel, yet has managed to survive until now. And this is the main point. White karma is often seen as a failed version, and that's the fact. Something imperfect, something that didn't achieve its original purpose as a vessel for Ishiki Otsutsuki. But if we flip the perspective, that failure is actually why he's become far more stable. Because what's missing from white karma is exactly what becomes the biggest burden for ordinary karma users. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? There's no Otsutsuki consciousness within him, no threat of being taken over, no internal conflict like what happened to Boruto Uzumaki with Momoshiki or even Kawaki. Meaning, all that power is purely his. And we have to admit it, even though he didn't fully inherit Ishiki's power, since he couldn't become Ishiki's vessel either, there's at least one crucial point I think we can't overlook. It's the aspect that's overlooked or dismissed because of a flaw or something deemed insignificant, simply because he's a failed product. Yeah, that's just how it is. And this is super important because in many cases in the shinobi world, great power always comes with a great price, or even from something that's been underestimated, right? And if we go back to the main point, then what's the connection to Code's white karma? And how will he return if our scenario or analysis about Code appearing in the middle of the Mamushi invasion doesn't actually happen, right? In short, here are a few points. First, back to Kara's base. Believe it or not, even though the percentage isn't very high, Code still has at least two bases. First and foremost, we must remember, after the Kara organization disbanded, Code became the leader. But unfortunately, Code, who was leading the Kara organization at that time, had one extremely powerful cyborg. Yeah, he was Daemon. And this is also the crucial part. Before the time skip, we saw how Code, who had just removed his limiter, still ended up losing to Daemon, even though Code confirmed he was stronger than Jigen. And from that defeat, we know that Code still has one place, his base. Together with Bug, Code brought him to a dimension of Ishiki where the Ten Tails is sealed. And in that dimension, we also know that Code's plan is to obtain the power needed to defeat Boruto and Konoha. But unfortunately, after Jubi incarnated into a divine tree human like Jura, Code, who was supposed to be their leader, ended up in a pitiful state after being humiliated by his own creation. Logically, Code currently has no place to return to as a base. But since we know Konoha has an interest in Ada and Daemon, especially since Konoha wants to exploit Ida's situation and her feelings for Kawaki, Konoha offered for Ida and Daemon to settle in Konoha. And once again, logically speaking, the Kara base shouldn't be in anyone's possession right now. And that means Code still has the option to at least return to his old base. And this is something we might not have considered so far. I know this might seem like an overactive imagination, but just imagine, The Kara base isn't the place where he was created or anything like that. It's also where Code first became Ishiki's failed vessel. The key point is, what if Code actually returned to the Kara base to conduct an experiment or something related to his white karma? For example, reconstruction or something like that. We know Amato's technology isn't just on one level. He can create cyborgs like Daemon and even modify the human body beyond normal limits, meaning Code's return to his old base has several possibilities. First is to repair or perhaps replace his arm with a far more perfect version. Or we might even get another plot twist involving his white karma. Instead of being unable to serve as Ishiki's vessel, his white karma might grant him a power, or perhaps even bodily regeneration. But at the very least, there's a process involved. It's not instant. Yeah, I admit that after hearing this prediction, it might sound like a fantasy, and I admit that. But sometimes, things beyond the bounds of imagination can happen. We've already seen some evidence and even plot twists we never expected. That means possibilities we never even considered could happen, right? Second, this is deeper. The resynchronization of white karma. Up until now, we've always considered white karma to be the failed version of Ishiki Otsutsuki's karma. But what if, at the Kara base, there's still research data on karma, backups of Amato's experiments, or even tools to read and modify the karma structure itself? And maybe it's still like point one. In other words, there's still a possibility to understand how white karma works more deeply, or even perfect. Its flaws without having to become a vessel. And this is crazy, because it means he's no longer dependent on the Otsutsuki, but creating his own version. And if the context is about creating his own version, then aside from relying on the Togadama or even a chakra fruit, there should be other options beyond those two, right? And as a final conclusion, if we pull all this together into a broad outline, there's actually one thing we have to question. Code's white karma isn't just a failed version, but rather an unbound version. He did indeed fail to become a vessel for Ishiki Otsutsuki, but at the same time, he's also free from all the limitations that Boruto and Kawaki possess. There's no Otsutsuki will, no internal conflict, and so on. That means all that power develops purely from within himself, and that's precisely what makes him far more dangerous than we thought. And this is where everything starts to make sense. Code's disappearance for over a year wasn't just because he lost his way, but it could be a phase where he was evolving beyond our imagination, predictions, or analysis. Whether through body reconstruction at base Kara, gaining a deeper understanding of white karma's structure, or even attempting to create a new form of power independent of the Otsutsuki system. Because if he truly finds a way to perfect white karma with his own version, then we're no longer talking about karma as we've known it all this time. And ultimately, if all of this is true, then when Code returns, he won't come back as the same character. He won't appear according to our predictions or become part of the scenario we've imagined. But he'll come as something new, something we might not have imagined before. So what do you think? Is this white karma truly a failure? Or is it actually the most dangerous form of evolution of the karma system itself? Or is it simply that we know Code is a failed product, so that means it stops right there? And most importantly, if we refer to Koji's dialogue in chapter 13 about Code possessing overwhelming power and turning Kawaki into food for the Ten Tails, will that happen in another timeline? Because we know that was Koji's prophecy when Kawaki succeeded in killing Boruto and Sarada. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? But what do you think? Will Code return to the Kara base as we predicted, or will something else happen? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Data Bio.